This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who cannot get enough of them. Is that how I usually start this? Sure, fine. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns, and somehow Path of Deceit is a month old, which means you don't know this if you haven't been listening to the show, but if you have, it means it is time to discuss spoilers. And here with me this week to discuss all the Path of Deceit spoilers is a great friend of mine who I've missed dearly, talking about Star Wars things, etc. So here's that discussion. It was great. Zoom kicked me out of the meeting at the end. It all ended up being just fine. So I hope you enjoy. Here we go. I am so happy that you're here on the show that I have created for some reason. I would like you to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell everyone who you are and, like, you know, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Why you and Star Wars?
Well, why me? I guess I bothered you on Twitter enough to get you to let me on the show. It's probably the starting point. But my name is Jacob. I go by, well, okay, so first off, how do you pronounce the bounty hunter that Leia disguises herself on as in Return of the Jedi?
Bosch?
Okay, so that's how I pronounce my last name, which is why I use it as my Twitter handle. It's Jacob. I pronounce the bounty hunter Bausch. I don't know if that's correct.
I've
heard Boosh as well, but anyways, my Twitter handle is Jacob Boushh, the bounty hunter, on Twitter. Not the bounty hunter's not part of it, but I talk about Star Wars. I mainly make memes at this point, I feel like, on Twitter. And then I also recently, this is like new as of like this week, or like 4 weeks ago by the time this podcast goes live, I made a TikTok, same handle, to vent all of my random Star Wars thoughts and make more memes mainly. So that's why I'm here.
Oh, I love that. I'm still not on TikTok, and I see TikToks. Like, I'm aware of the potential that TikTok has for me, but I'm afraid that if I download the app, create an account, and start using it, that I will do the thing I'll always do, which is I go somewhere new and I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is fun to just watch. But then I'm afraid that like I'm going to want to make things, and I don't have time. I don't have time to make more things.
I think it's a cool platform. I'm like, it makes me feel incredibly old. I am 26 and I feel like I am like nearing retirement age on the app sometimes, but it's been fun to kind of mess around and get used to it. But it is a spiral. I will say that.
I just
it sucks you in.
I've heard that the algorithm just like figures out what you like, and just video after video, it would probably be such a stress reliever, but like once I get into the book talk thing, then like there's no going back. It's just all I'm going to do, like every minute of every day. And like, I don't know, would that be so terrible? Maybe not. Maybe this is the convincing that I needed to finally get one.
I think it's healthy to, because I did like dip my toes in with Instagram Reels. And I think what I did there was I set a screen timer on my phone. I could only do like 20 minutes of Instagram a day, and I've been like pretty good about sticking to that. I should add that for TikTok, but I have not done that yet, and it has become a problem. But it's fine. Anyways,
the social media is great, always, all the time. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, no issues whatsoever.
Oh, so we are here technically today. We've been talking for so long already, even before we started recording, because just why not? We are technically here today to talk about Path of Deceit, and it will be a full spoiler discussion because it's been, by the time you're hearing this, it's been a month since the book came out. There's already another High Republic book that's already out, and then like a couple weeks from now there'll be another one, because That's just how the High Republic is. It's just one thing after the other. And listen, that's not a complaint. I am loving what we are getting so far, and we'll talk about that. But because I have not had you on this show yet, and I will again, because I've talked so much about comics recently, and I have to say every time that I don't know enough about comics, but you do, because you are just,
I do.
You are so good at keeping up with comics, which I'm not, like really knowing like how everything connects, which I don't. So I originally planned first to have you on to talk all about comics, but we are doing that episode some other time that's not now, because you were tweeting about Path of Deceit and how much you loved it. And I was like, oh goodness, I need to have you on to talk about this book. So here we are. That's why we're doing the thing. But before we get into this fantastic book, because I just love this book, just to start off, it's just like all the High Republic books that have come before this one, I've thoroughly enjoyed. But for some reason, this one just like really grabbed me. And like, I got to the end and I was like, I am hurt. I am emotional.
Yes. Yep.
I immediately need the next book now. I do not want to wait. No, thank you. So it's so good. And we'll talk about that, because George Mann is just, he belongs in Star Wars. I'm so glad he's here and that he's continuing to do so many great things. He is, I don't know if I should have said this earlier, but I called him the Kevin Scott phase 2, because he's doing everything. He's doing everything. Like, he's got the audio drama. There's so much, but like, he's so good at what he does. I just hope that he's getting the much deserved downtime and rest that he needs, because that's very important. I'm also really looking forward to that audio drama because so many reasons.
Right.
But before we get into this book and the High Republic in general, because the longer the High Republic goes on, the more I love it. It's just something about the story just continuing to unfold before us. It's so good. I keep trying to force myself to go forward, and I just love everything. That's why we're here. I want to ask you, I am such a great podcast.
We're getting there.
This is just how this show is, and I've accepted that this is how I do it, and it's never going to change no matter how hard I try. I would like to know how you, Jacob, comics extraordinaire, got into Star Wars books and comics, both, either or, it doesn't matter. Where did it all begin for you? Because I found everyone has a slightly different story, and they're all great. They're all different and fascinating. So tell me about yours.
So for books, we have actually, the two of us actually have a very similar starting point, I feel. Mine came a lot from my public library, and I remember I was into the Galaxy of Fear books and the Last of the Jedi. Not Last Jedi, but Last of the Jedi, the Scholastic book series. I was a little kid, went to the library like at least once a week, and they had Quest or Jedi Quest and Jedi Apprentice, which are like the Obi-Wan and Anakin and the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon like little kid chapter books. And those are as far as I can tell, they're far more popular than Last of the Jedi. However, my problem is, even back then I was a compulsive little child, and they were on the spinner racks, but you could never find the series together. Like it would all just be like, here's 11, here's like number 7, here's 4. So I'm like, well, I can't read the whole series, so I won't even want to start. However, they had the entire series of Last of the Jedi together, so of course I read those instead. And then like growing up later, my first adult novel that I remember reading, I did it like for a middle school book club, was Outbound Flight by Timothy Zahn. And to this day, it shocks a lot of people. I have read Outbound Flight. I have read every Canon Thrawn novel. I have never opened Heir to the Empire, which it probably just lost me all brownie points, all street cred I had somehow. But yeah, that's my book journey. And then my comics journey was so I graduated my undergrad in 2018, and I was in a STEM field at the time, and I needed a creative outlet because I used to have that and like playing music in college, and I didn't have it anymore. So I'm like, I like Star Wars. Star Wars is cool. I'm gonna read Star Wars again and like maybe do some content stuff around it. And everyone, like, when you get into content on the internet, you'll realize everyone has their angle. And I'm like, well, some people are good at like Star Wars cosplay or Star Wars like memes or like what, or you're Alex Damon from Star Wars Explained, you just do everything. And I'm like, well, okay, I can never be the best at anything, like just being like the Alex Damon type. So I'm like, I'm gonna pick one thing. I ended up picking two things, but my one thing at the time was Star Wars comics. So I got myself a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, read every single canon comic in a summer. Actually, there's still like some IDW stuff I have to go back and get to eventually, but all the Marvel stuff, I read it all. And then when High Republic came out, I'm like, well, this is like, I'm coming in at ground, like from ground one. Like with canon books, I was out of it for a few years after the transition, and I still am not all the way caught up. But High Republic, if I start now, I can, stay on top of everything. And so far I have. So that's kind of my Star Wars journey in a nutshell. And here we are.
Oh, I would love to be able to say I've read so many of the canon comics. I haven't read, there are probably a few exceptions to this here and there, but I haven't read a Star Wars comic since 2020. I just,
what?
Listen, like,
oh man,
I know that my show is about Star Wars books, stories, or whatever you want to call it. Comics are just like, here's my problem. Here's my problem with comics. I love them. I want to read them all, but it's like, I just, I don't know. They're so short that like, you can do like, one in a very short amount of time, one issue. But my problem is that if I do that, I want to read like all of them. And
right.
just like, then you're sitting there forever. They're so good. I need to, maybe when I take my break in December, I will spend some of that time catching up on comics, especially because there are fewer High Republic comics because they just haven't been going as long. So maybe I start there.
Right. We can definitely, I'll be back eventually and we can definitely talk about this.
Yes.
But
please. Yes, please. Oh, but we're not talking about comics today. I mean, actually, well, we might talk about them a little bit because Eye of the Storm is the thing that is very important. And that's a problem for me. But as I said, we are here to talk about Path of Deceit, which is the first High Republic book in Phase 2. And it is a young adult novel by Justina Ireland and Tessa Gratton. Justina Ireland is not only a High Republic veteran, one of the OG High Republic authors, but has done other Star Wars things before that, outside of that. And we'll probably do more of that at some point. Tessa Gratton, before this, contributed one story to Stories of Jedi and Sith, which is just a great little anthology that I enjoyed very, very much. And now we have this author in the High Republic. I love that they're adding more authors to kind of like mix up the storytelling, because like I love the OG5. They're great. But to kind of like give them room to kind of do different things or do fewer things, and to like bring more authors into this story that's just getting really, really big, like in a good way. I think that was a great decision. Like I wasn't sure if they were going to do that. But I'm very, very happy that they did. And especially because this book, co-written by two authors, which was very, very, very good. I don't know how else to describe it because we haven't talked about it at all. But I also like the fact that we are now 150 years before Phase 1. So Star Wars is doing its classic, like, we're going to do a prequel now in the middle of things, because you know what, it works, and this book kind of really proves that, because we're finding out things about things that happen later that now make more sense, but also technically you could come into the High Republic, read this book, not know any of that, and still really enjoy it. I think, we'll talk about that more too, but I was going to ask you, and I still want to, so we'll start here. Do you have so far, and it could include this one, do you have a favorite High Republic book and or a favorite comic series so far?
Okay, so going into this, I don't know if I had like one book that was my favorite. I think definitely that Into the Dark was up there for me.
Yeah.
I really like that. But this book in particular, Path of Deceit, really it is contending, I would say, in like my top 3 High Republic books. It just gripped me from start to finish, and I think we can talk about this a little bit more in depth. So I just got my physical copy yesterday because I ordered a signed copy. So super happy to get that signed by both authors.
Nice.
And so I audiobooked it, and I think the audiobook for this was, I don't know if you've talked about it on your show at all, but Aftermath is commonly cited as a book that the audiobook really, really improves the experience for.
Yeah.
And judging by reactions of other people I've seen online, I think that we might have a similar scenario here. Because did you read or did you listen?
This is the first High Republic book where I have read it and not listened to it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had the review copy and I just kind of like, it was there. So I just read it. But audiobook is good.
Right. So I think for this one, a lot of people have said it was a little bit too slow for them, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. It definitely builds a while, and it's kind of a theme that's gone throughout the High Republic YA novels. Like Into the Dark was a completely different book, like the last third. Out of the Shadows like kicks off in like what feels like the last 30 pages. Like they definitely have been slow building books, but I think the audio quality, the production, the music was great. Like it really like was atmospheric when you're on Dalna, and the performer does such an amazing job with Marta that I was like I am like just immersed in this world. Whereas if you're just reading it, you're like, I'm building, I'm getting towards a like eventual endpoint. But I think that audiobook really just like had me grasped the entire time in a way that I would definitely recommend it if people like had trouble reading, like physically reading the book. But all that to say, I think it is definitely like in my top 3 High Republic novels at this point.
Yeah, it is very good. And like and I'm sure it will, if the series continues to just be this captivating, I think I will end up liking this phase even more than the first one, which I didn't really think was possible, because the phase 1 was just a roller coaster, but in a good way. There was pain, but there was also hope, but also a lot of pain, which is not going to stop, but it's fine,
right.
question mark. Yeah. But I will have to check out the audiobook. Yeah. Oh
yeah. And I think my favorite comic.
Oh yes.
I think my favorite might be the High Republic Adventures, just like the entire line from the first phase. It was just like those characters were so rich, and it's a great fun book that I think, or comic book that I think is super cool. That's basically capped off with a novel in Midnight Horizon. So I love that. However, if you're trying to read that comic book right now, it's incredibly difficult to do with IDW licensing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
In the United States, the like last 5 issues are not collected anywhere, so you have to order them from the UK, who did get trade paperback of that. But so I will also throw out the alternate suggestion, or anyways, Trail of Shadows is a very good book. It's a mini series. It's only 5 issues. You can buy it in one trade paperback and read it all together. And I think it's very consequential in the overall story. So I think it's a very good read for anyone. And it kind of bridges the time. It like picks up basically directly after the Rising Storm and goes up to the climax of the Fallen Star. So it's also like a nice solid chunk of time. So definitely would recommend that. It like really gets into the mystery of the Nameless and all that. So would recommend.
Yeah, especially as we're getting into this book, and the Nameless are back, baby. And like,
I wish they weren't. It hurts my heart.
It really does. And like, the more we learn about them, let's just get into it. The more we learn about them, I'm like, now we know what they look like. We know like how they're controlled. I just, why do they have to exist? It's not it's not good for anybody. It's going to continue to not end well.
It's very emotionally traumatic to read this book.
It really is. I was not okay. So as like the first, considering how we left phase one, which is everything is terrible, I figured, okay, maybe the second phase, because it's so far in the past, will start out a little less tragic. I was wrong.
No.
It was so
I'm
wrong.
still waiting for this golden era of the Jedi. We were promised peace and prosperity in the galaxy, and so far it's depressing, and everyone I love is dying.
Okay. I will spoilers. This is a spoiler discussion. So I'm going to spoil. I'm going to spoil like the ending right now. All the Jedi die, and I just can't.
Literally, well, yeah. Hey, one Jedi survived, and it's the one that we were introduced in the first like one chapter of the book, and they came back at the very end to be like, "Wow, where did everyone go? They're all dead."
Okay, well,
that was the only surviving Jedi.
The like one of the premises of this phase in the High Republic is that like it's not as easy to communicate over long distances as it is later on in the story, right? So like, if ever you would be in a situation where you need to get a very important message out to someone before you die, later on in the timeline that would be possible, but not now.
No, it's here we are.
So like, there's so much pain because we got a basic idea of like what the Nameless are capable of in terms of like what they do to Jedi at the end of the last phase and in other stories. But it was so much more tragic in this book because like what's going to happen before it happens, but then when it happens you're like, like the only people that knew why this was happening and how this was possible can't warn anyone else.
It's really like, this dramatic irony. It's like a supreme example of dramatic irony where you're like, oh no. But even like I had that like moment of like, well, it only touched him like briefly, like it probably was through clothing. We've seen people survive encounters with the Nameless before. He's gonna like he'll and then just like slowly over the course of like a chapter and a half, I have to watch my like little cute innocent boy Kevmo, who again I feel like I'm way more attached to having listened to the audiobook, perish. And the only person that left on this planet that is sympathetic to him and cares about him does nothing. Spoilers again, I'm dead inside after reading this book.
Just like Kevmo.
Kevmo's dead on the outside as well, so there's a big difference there.
Outside, inside, everything is dead. It's I think the most we're just gonna get right into all of the darkness. I was gonna try to start out like, here's what the path of the open hand is. No, we're just
we're just dive right full bore right off the jump. Sadness.
So like I said, I was not expecting the story to be as just outright hurtful as it was. Not that the authors are sorry about it. Like, don't get me wrong. They're unapologetic, and you know what? They have a right to be because they're the ones who had to write it. So I'm just assuming they were hurt too. It's fine. The fact that the reason that Marta really hates the Jedi and kind of how that like comes down the line later is because she loved a Jedi and then this happened, and then she was like, oh, it's because of how they treated the Force, it's all their fault. That hurts me in a way that I cannot even describe.
Yeah it's I don't even really know how to it's just so difficult to like. It's incredible how well Justina Ireland and Tessa Gratton made me care about all these people in such a short time. And then just it's not even like the like phase one situation where you have like a few books to get attached to them and then they die. It's like one book. You care about them more than like, these are my little babies, my children. I love them. My literary, just my friends. And already like, the amount of heartbreak that came out of that book is immense.
Oh, and I really like, because in a lot of these stories and a lot of stories in general, you have this situation where two people from very different backgrounds will come together and like they'll kind of like, expose each other to the other way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that like someone like Marta would kind of be like, and she started to kind of learn like, oh, like this is how the Jedi think of the Force, it's different than what I think. And you might think to yourself, at the beginning of the story, oh, well, she's going to learn, that difference. She's going to learn that maybe it's not what she thought, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
things will work out fine for her. No.
No, I mean, yeah, like we see the arc where like at first she like the fact that he moves a flower is like just the most horrific thing to her. And we get to the point where, okay, she's being confronted by a tough situation. These baby bird children basically are like gonna die. They're like people that we've been shown how close she is to them and how much they mean to her. And Kevmo uses the Force to save him, her and all these children. And it's like, okay, that's it. This is her arc. She's like becoming understanding of how the Force works, and is going to at least be like accepting of Kevmo and his like Jedi powers going forward. And then no we're definitely not. I don't want to say like we're back, like there was no arc and we're just kind of like it's like a circle where it's back to the start. I think there's still definitely like a lot of development her character goes through, but like that understanding bit, we did not make it, unfortunately.
I do think that like, because we're very used to stories where like the character growth is they change their ways or they change their perspective or like they end the book doing things differently than they did before. But I think it is still technically growth in that the character chooses not to change, which is terrible.
Right.
Which is just so tragic. But like it explains so much about how like, when we get to, back to phase 1, back to later in the timeline, why, there's the question of why does Marchion Ro hate the Jedi so much? Well, like this is the beginning of like, this is how, certain messages about certain things are passed down. It's like someone or a group of people has one experience, and now they're like, oh, okay, like the Jedi are terrible because this. We can't trust them. We don't like them. We don't need them. And also, even it more to the extreme of like Jedi bad, no. And like it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like I think just with the nature of the Path of the Open Hand, we're gonna make a lot of like religious or cultural comparisons to like the real world. I think like Marta like is going like, like you said, that affirmation of her beliefs is incredibly important to her journey. I think it's like she almost goes like on her like little mini Force cult like Rumspringa, where like she's confronted with the outside world and like has like that temptation and still in the end like rejects it and comes back to like what her beliefs are, like that core.
I think though, for me, like as tragic as that is, like it is very powerful because at this point, especially in like Star Wars storytelling in this series, you almost expect one thing, but the fact that you're getting something different kind of tells you a lot about how these stories are going to be moving forward, which is it's not always going to be what you're expecting. And like there are a lot of things in Star Wars stories that like they might end the way that you think they're going to, or they might be a little bit more predictable. Not that that's a bad thing, but like the way that you get to that end point sometimes is unexpected, and that's what makes it kind of magical. But there are going to be like storytelling moments, moving forward where like you think it's going to go one way and it's not, and it's tragic, but it's not like the wrong thing to do. I really like that because it is like kind of just like the High Republic in terms of storytelling, not necessarily like in universe, is just evolving. And I like that. Because it would be like if phase 2 was kind of like a repeat of phase 1, it probably, it didn't need to be like that, right? And so I like how it's immediately just starting out as like, oh, hey, like, no, it's not all good. We're gonna just take more hope away from you. But they keep telling us that it's gonna end on a hopeful note, or it's going to get more hopeful or something like that. I don't feel that right now. It's
no, I don't think it will. Like even like I think phase 2 like is probably going to I don't know. Like, I don't even know if that will be hopeful. I don't know if phase 3 will end hopeful either. I feel like, I think maybe the evil is vanquished, but I don't know if like the heroes are left off better for it.
Yeah, I mean, we do know how the Jedi end up in the prequels,
Yeah.
so, and I think we're learning more and more about how they get there, which, I do have this point on here, and I guess I'll kind of pose you this question. Is it too dark for you? Because, well, the thing about, like, because I heard this is all valid, like these kinds of criticisms are totally valid. A lot of reactions to the end of phase 1 were like, it's too dark. Like, I don't want this. I need to know what happens. I don't, there's too much, like, we lost this character. It's, everything is terrible. If it continues to get darker, like, are we all gonna be okay with that? Like, not just like jokingly like, oh, we're so emotional, but like, is it possible to make a Star Wars series too dark?
I mean, people I'll make a quick joke and then get to like my actual answer. If people survive the 19 book trauma that is like New Jedi Order, like killing all of your favorite characters and literally chucking a moon at Chewbacca, I think we'll be okay. But no, my real answer, like, I think it's a very difficult that phase 1 ended in such a dire position, and the fact that we're not going to get a resolution to that for like another year-ish with phase 3. Like, it's like you've gotten to like the bad part of like a story, and you cannot get to the good part until we like go back, which I think like, don't get me wrong, I'm excited to go back, but for the people that were like really like emotionally like distraught or like hurt by phase 1, they're not going to like get their just like Bur Yaga. Like, I'm not gonna know what happened to Bur Yaga until at least like November of next year. And that hurts.
It does.
Like, that hurts a lot. I think like personally, like, I am okay with like the darkness of these series so far, but I understand, like, especially for this book in particular, like, I've seen a lot of people with like religious trauma, like this book hurt them a lot and like came for them hard, and like I like those experiences are valid, and like I understand why you did, like, this might be a little bit too much for those people.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. It's like the thing about all these stories is like, because everyone comes to them with vastly different experiences, you're going to have certain people who like take something away from it that is just too much. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if there's ever a book where you're like, it wasn't bad, I just can't vibe with it, like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I totally see that, because this book is very much speaking to that kind of experience. And I'll explain it because I didn't before, and I will. I know that, maybe you're listening to this and you haven't read the book yet, and that's, what, if you're into that, if you don't mind spoilers, that is fine. So the Path of the Open Hand, which is the group, I'll say group, that Marta is part of, and various other characters, that everything turns out fine for them, totally. They believe that the Force should be free, right? So the way that the Jedi use the Force, by actually just using it and not just letting the Force flow and do whatever it does, they really see that as abusing the Force, as in like, you are controlling it, and that is not right. And that can be, as some beliefs do end up, can be taken to the extreme, which is not great. But that is the Jedi who arrive on this planet. That's who they encounter. And we've seen the Jedi come across like plenty of obstacles throughout Star Wars, in terms of like meeting people they, maybe have never interacted with before, or it's a challenge in this way or that. But like, I can't remember anything quite like this. And it is very unique, because it's not just, someone coming in saying like, oh, I've heard this about the Jedi, I already don't like you. It's, you are doing something in front of me that is fundamentally against everything I stand for. And I'm sure we've seen that idea, but just not presented exactly like this. And I really is really interesting to me, that you are encountering someone that's like, you are a Jedi, you literally use the Force, and I cannot accept that.
Right. Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of differing belief systems. This is like something that I think the era of the sequel movies brought out a lot, where it's like, well, the Jedi path is not the only way to commune with the Force. Like there are other, like the Night Sisters, like there are so many other like ways to interpret and like see the Force. Like even in the Jedi and the High Republic, like I see it as a fire or a song or the ocean, where like by the time you get to the prequel trilogy, it's like it's just the web of interconnected beings, and that is it. That's the only thing we see. But I think another like cool place that's like looks like it's going to analyze this discussion and like get into like different belief systems a lot is the High Republic comics for Phase 2 by Cavan Scott. Because so at time recording, the first issue came out this week, and it's like you're going to Jeddah, and the Jeddah we see in this time of the timeline is way different than what we see in the New Republic, because there's still like dozens of Force groups coming together, and they're all different. And like there are some that like here you have the path of the open hands. Like I see the Jedi is evil, like, or any Force user is evil. Where on Jeddah, the Jedi are still kind of, some people don't like the Jedi. The Jedi see other groups as like inherently dark side, and there's like that clash of belief systems there that I think is definitely going to be examined a lot more in this phase.
And I love that. I love that, like this kind of conflict that we're seeing in this phase it's just like in Star Wars, you're so, especially if like you came in with like the more original things, and that's very much like good versus evil. And it goes deeper than that, but like that's really like there are the good guys and there are the bad guys, and that's just the fundamentals of that storytelling, and it just continues to become more complex as stories evolve. But I really like how like this conflict is very like you would see this, and you do see this in just the real world of just like people just believing different things and just not agreeing. And it's, even if it doesn't come out to like a full scale war yet, it's still a problem. As the wars in the stars, as it happens sometimes.
Yeah, I think like a really like, not to get too far down the Jeddah like train, because that it's not really touched that much on this book. I see really like after the first issue, I really see like a very strong direct comparison from the Jeddah during Phase 2 to like the way the Abrahamic religions treat like Jerusalem in like the modern world, where it's like you have the like Judaism has like this sector of the city, and like Islam has this sector of the city, and like all of the different Christian like different like oh god, what are they called, the different like branches of Christianity, like literally they'll be like this, we control the stairs, we control this part of this basilica, we control this part. Like it's like you have all of these different like belief systems congregating on one small city that has like a lot of meaning to all of them. And when you have that, there's going to be some like conflict there. But anyways,
yeah, no, that is like one reason that I advocate for trying out all the stories in the High Republic, not just the main adult novels. Like even if you don't read both comic series or all the comic miniseries or anything, like it all interconnects. And I think the thing about especially what we're seeing and what we've already seen, we'll continue to see in the High Republic, is like in small ways or big ways, all the stories build on each other, and like you get something out of reading everything. That's not to say that you have to, but I think there is value in like, even if you don't consider yourself or never have a comics reader, like try it. I think because there's just so like it. Like even just like hearing that and what this comic is about, and I'm totally not gonna go immediately read that after this at all. I have to buy it first, because what is this? What is this? Having to buy comics? I'm supporting everyone who worked on them. That's why. It's a good time to start reading comics. That is What I'll say about that, speaking of comics, we're just going to keep talking about comics, but that's why you're here. See, I choose my guests very, very purposely. So full disclosure, and this is not a surprise to anyone who's ever listened to even one episode of the show. Eye of the Storm, which is a comic miniseries about Martian Row, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I have not read it,
Right.
but I do know, thanks to some of the jobs that I have, that it's nice to have read that as you're reading Path of Deceit. So
yeah,
if you would like to tell me a little bit more about that.
So, okay, before I even say that, again, like Meg said, you don't have to read everything. I think there's certainly a payoff to those that do. If you want to know more about the Path of the Open Hand and like how the Nihil spring up and the Nameless and everything like that, well, less so than the Nameless. There's a lot for that, but I would recommend, in addition to Eye of the Storm, reading the High Republic Adventures, all of it, especially the first volume. As well as Race Crash Point Tower, because it gets into that a lot more. But basically, Eye of the Storm is a story. It's kind of like an origin story of Marchion Row. Like, it shows him early on with his father Asgar, and you see them really start to like get their grasp on the Nihil, because they weren't always like the leaders of the group, or the Eye. And then it also, you see his grandmother, Marchion's grandmother at the time. You see, Marie Santeca. And then we also, it kind of like flashes throughout his life. You see him go to this planet where you get the Nameless, which is going to be, I think, very important in the next YA novel. Mm-hmm. And potentially maybe it was in the High Republic show that came out this week. They're like, yeah, we're like, everything's interconnected, but we also like are trying to keep the different formats more together. So like the YA is going to really tie into the next YA, middle grade to middle grade, adult novel to adult novel. So the obviously the next Y book is going to continue a lot of this, and it's going to be important. But I think, potentially with Quest to Planet X, what could Planet X be, I wonder?
Oh no.
So yeah, but anyways, yeah, you see him get all the different, like, the levelers are Nameless, and that's what he uses for the Fallen Star. And then, okay, the crazy part is at the end of, so if you didn't read this like, you see the latest like timeline event in phase 1 in this comic book at the very end. So you know how like you think that Starlight Beacon falling is like the last like worst thing to happen. It gets worse.
Oh no.
Like Marchion's like basically like he has like kidnapped a Jedi, and is like he like kills them, like basically tells, like, does like the villain thing of telling him what's going on, and then kills him with a leveler. And then at the very end, he's like, the like gravity well technology that they develop in Out of the Shadows. He like basically shuts down the hyper lanes to the Outer Rim, just like full stop. So that's how phase 1 ends. So if you didn't read the comic book, you didn't get to see that. So but yeah, like the Path of the Open Hand, as far as I can tell, they exist. Yana and Marta are probably like the next big leaders of it in a certain way, maybe not directly, but maybe more like that Eye to the Nihil situation, where they just have a lot of influence. And then at some point, here's a Race Crash Point Tower reference, Elder Barbatos is an old dude in the clan on Tremont 4. I'm getting really in the weeds here. He talks about how his group split off from the Nihil a long time ago, and he had survived a massacre of some sort. So like the Path is going to go through some bad stuff. The Jedi are probably going to make a lot of mistakes. Have they learned from them in phase 1? I don't know that they have.
Of course not.
And eventually things get so bad that the like more peaceful side of the group is going to take the like control rod, split it in two and hide it, and then freeze the Nameless up on Rystan, which is where Marchion's cousin is in the Rising Storm. If you read every single thing, which can honestly feel like, if I'm being honest, it does feel like a chore sometimes. There are threads everywhere, and I'm gonna stop now, or you will like, we're gonna be here a while.
The High Republic, like if you just look at like everything that's been released, it can feel very overwhelming, but like there are so many resources out there to help you like navigate. A lot of people want to know what the order is, but like, if you just want to know, like, if I'm gonna start with this one thing, what do I read? And then the High Republic, like just fandom in general, like on Twitter or wherever you might be, is so helpful. Like people who love these stories want to help other people get into these stories. So if you just like, if you want to tweet, be like, hey, how do I read the High Republic? You're gonna get some help somewhere out there. I mean, if you don't want to tweet, don't do that. But like the whole point of like being a fan of Star Wars books in general should be part of that, helping other people figure out how to do it. So there are people that will help you, because like if it's like you have all of your books and then so many comics, and then there are audio dramas too. What is this?
There's short stories and
all the shorts. I forget about the short stories.
And video games VR video games that reference it. Like there's a lot of stuff out there. Like if you were to consume it manga,
the manga.
There's a lot. But the nice thing is, like, obviously you can, people are very helpful, but also just in general, I think the High Republic community online is very overwhelmingly positive, which makes it a lot more comfortable to make those, go out and ask those questions. I would say if you're like, I don't know where to start, obviously I think Light of the Jedi is generally recommended as the first starting point, and you can kind of decide how deep you want to dip your toes in after that. There are lots of helpful resources on, even if you're like, I don't know, some people don't like Reddit. If you go to the High Republic subreddit, they have like a pinned thing at the top that's like, here's like all these reading order resources.
Perfect.
But then also, like, there's been an interesting conversation on, I think it'd be kind of cool to talk about this, is Path of Deceit a viable starting point for the High Republic?
Yeah. Oh, it's like, because we were told, certain creators are like, oh yeah, if you want to get into the High Republic, you can start with Path of Deceit. It's like, you don't need to know anything that's come before. Like, you can read this book and you'll be fine. I said that, any entry point that you can find if you're overwhelmed is a good thing, right? Like, you want to be able to come into something and just get started, because once you get started, it's easier to keep going. But I read this book, having not known everything, but having known enough from having read all of the books in phase 1, really kind of almost questioning that. And I'm not denying that, like, if you did come into Path of Deceit not having read High Republic anything, I think you would really enjoy the story. I think you would get the messaging, and I think that I don't think you would be confused, but I feel like without any of that prior foundation, like, would you appreciate it as much? That's what I've been trying to think about in my brain, because I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, it comes down to like the age-old question of what order do I watch the Star Wars movies in? And there are lots of right answers to that.
Yeah.
So I still think probably phase 1 is better off. Like, you're better off starting there. Although, I think, this story is very self-contained to where I think my biggest holdup with recommending this, like, as a first point of jumping off, is I would be incredibly confused by the whole, like, nameless at the end. I would have no idea what's going on. And like just like if I'm a reader and I pick this up in like October of this year or November of this year, and this might not be expounded upon until the next YA book in like 4 or 5, however many months from now,
right,
I would just be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Because it's like, this is so confusing. Why, like, it's not, like, it'd be one thing if it was a mystery novel, but it's not a mystery novel.
Right.
So it's like, that would be, it's like this monster kills like it was confusing enough when it happened in the Rising Storm that like, if you had absolutely zero context for it, I'd be a little, that's my main holdup. I think still beyond that, it is again so self-contained. You basically have like half a dozen main characters that barely ever leave one planet. I think you can read it almost on its own, but I just have that one holdup.
I wonder about that though, because if the point of giving someone an entry point into a Star Wars series is to get them to read more, then you would be confused about the Nameless. But would it also, when you got to the end of Path of Deceit, would you be like, I'm confused, I want to know what this means? Would you then go back and start reading all of phase 1?
The only me, yeah, I would be interested, but I think like if I'm putting myself in those shoes of this hypothetical person, if someone's like, here, read this book, and then like, I want to know more, what's that monster, and then you tell them to read phase 1, and it will be several books before anything like meaningful gets explained in that might be a little bit hard of a sell. Like they might get like a little fed up of being like, hey, I'm like 4 books in, what is I still haven't really learned what's going on there, because like there really is no like meaningful answer to those questions until like the very end of the phase.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. I think it really does depend on like, in a lot of ways, like how much information you feel like you need to enjoy a story as a reader. And I think like also what kind of reader you are, because like if you are the kind of person, because I am like this, where if you read something and you want more information and you know that's out there, you will go back to the beginning and read everything to get to that point. But not everyone is like that. And if that would frustrate you, then it's hard to sell that. Yeah, you can read this and you'll be fine. Like we said, if you were to read this and had not read anything else before, you would still be able to enjoy it. Like it is a very good book. There would just be things that you would have more questions about than answers. It really is like the answer to that question of could you come into it with nothing else, with no prior knowledge, it's really up to you.
I think you can. I question if it is the best entry, but I definitely think it is a valid entry. But I mean, I should also like mention the lens I approach this from, which is I am the obsessive, I want to know everything kind of person. So for like me personally, that's why like I think this way, but not everyone is gonna like have those preferences.
Exactly. I mean, so many of us just want all the answers right now, please. And don't want to read a whole book series to figure that out. But like I will say to that, like there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a payoff to going out and seeking all the answers through the long game, which is reading everything. But like that being said, like I think the High Republic, if you're really into it, you could get through a lot of it fairly quickly. It's a lot of content, but like especially if you're reading like the middle grade stuff also, which you should, those are really fast because that's just the nature of middle grade. So like it really is like how much commitment do you want to make? Can you make? Are you willing to make? That's the thing about Star Wars is like once you like get into it, it's like sometimes it's hard to stop, but also you don't know where to start. It's a whole books are hard, but they're also so good.
Yeah, I think with like Michael Siglane's comments, I mentioned earlier that he's like, yeah, we're gonna try and like compartmentalize a little bit more. Make it. I think that's gonna make things a lot easier because. With phase 1, there were some jumping around to where you could read just the adult novels and then add on like on top of that whatever you wanted. Like if you wanted to read YA too, great. If you also want to read middle grade, great. But like if you had the approach of something that comes up a lot with recommending books is like, I like this character, how do I follow this character? If you would ask to follow like Lula Talisola, I'd be like, okay, you have to read all of the High Republic Adventures comics, and then you have to then read the middle grade novel from phase 2, and then the YA novel from wave 2, and then the YA novel from wave 3. But then also all of those have other characters that are interconnecting from other mediums. So like her arc ends for now with Midnight Horizon, but to read Midnight Horizon, you should really know about Wreath, which means you have to read the other YA novels before. Like there's lots of like webs and waves and flow charts that are happening with these different characters, and I think hopefully and I enjoyed it. Like it's great to see like all these characters crossing over and appearing in different authors' stories and in different mediums, but like I think the phase 2 approach might make it a little bit more reader friendly.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to that, because it is like, you can see from like the creators' perspective, like how they're learning from what they did in phase 1. And they're kind of like, oh, like phase 1 worked, but let's try this. And that really showed that they're just so, like, if you look at like everyone that is working on this series, like they are so dedicated to just doing the best they possibly can with it. And it's like, it's a lot. They've been working on this for so long, and everything, especially if you're just looking at phase 1, everything is so interconnected, and different authors are taking on different characters and like swapping things back and forth and doing all these things. And like the fact, like, even if we just take a step back and like look at what has already been done, like that should not have been possible. And yet,
Right.
and yet they did it somehow.
Yeah. The fun like conversation I like to have is like, before the High Republic, by far the most like expansive Star Wars publishing initiative was like the New Jedi Order, which had like 19 novels, and I think like a novella or something, and maybe like a few comic book tie-ins. I'm not really sure. I'm not super familiar with it, but it's like an insane amount of content.
Yeah.
And the fact that, but it's still, it's like one, you know, for the most part, like one throughput line of adult novels, like one after the other, where now we have all these authors in all of these mediums, like all producing, like by the end, what's going to be more content than the New Jedi Order, all interwoven, is just, it's crazy. Like the amount of effort to coordinate that and like make sure everything's like flowing pretty smoothly is pretty crazy. And like the fact that we've done all this, and like the only like the 2 major continuity errors that have happened through like a dozen books and all these comics and everything is Jorah Molly's lightsaber color was wrong, and like one character showed up at 2 places at once, and that's it. Like everything else has been like pretty like solid, which is in like just the amount of like dedication and coordination. Like their Slack channel must just be so active at all time, making like it's like someone has a flow chart mapping every character and all that. Like it's incredible the amount of like work and coordination that went into this.
It's almost like they needed to bring on more writers, because like you only had like, you had the quote unquote core group of writers doing all of that, and it's like, well, you know, we'll add some more. But they really are, they just chose so well. And so far, you know, we got this book, and then I just finished reading Quest for the Hidden City. I can never remember what that title is, that George Mann wrote, and like not saying anything about it now, obviously, but like quality stuff is just, you know, I am all for bringing more writers into the mix and seeing what they can do, because like it's just making the High Republic already just so much richer in the best way possible. I'm just so happy. The High Republic, it feels like it just started, even though it's been going for a while, and it's just like there's so much more of it. Although and I keep forgetting about this, but for some reason phase 2 is only 2 waves instead of 3. So within the next year, we will already be getting the next phase, which is like, you know what? Hit me with it. It's fine. But that also means that, you know what? You're still not going to have a ton of time to catch up on everything if you need to. It's, what is time? What's happening?
Well,
I have
here's
no idea.
The nice thing I will say, the caveat, and then like the nice thing I'll add on, you know, having time to catch up with everything. Publishing delays are so widespread and persistent that you probably will have enough time if you just like commit. You can do it. Like Quest of the Jedi is a one-shot comic. That means it's a single issue comic story, and it got delayed like 4 months. Like what? Like I don't understand. The nice thing though is like with what I've read so far, it seems to me like they are strategically, I think like comic book delays have been so bad across the board, like across the industry, that that's probably like the bottleneck. But it seems like they are trying to delay things together to make sure like the story that unfolds in phase 2 makes sense as things come out in release order. Because like my having only read the first issue of the comic, I'm pretty sure it happens in the middle of this of Path of Deceit. And so like obviously these things have all been delayed together, but like there was it seems like there's some planning between Marvel and Del Rey and Disney Lucasfilm Press to make sure everything still makes sense as it comes out, which is very much appreciated. Again, all that coordination to make sure we get the best experience.
Right. I just remember last year, which book was it? Ooh, the book of
Are you talking about the audiobook that came out early?
Yes, the book that was supposed to come out in January physically did not come out until
Mission to Disaster.
Yes, did not come out until March, but the audiobook released on time, which was such a wild experience. It just showed up in my Audible and I was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, the audiobook and the ebook came out in January, but the physical book was delayed. Like the actual, like it wasn't even like the physical book delayed. It was like, hey, the release we're telling you the release is in March after it had been delayed like twice back there.
Yeah.
It was originally supposed to come out on the same day as The Fallen Star. However, the audiobook or the ebook or whatever came out early, and the wild part is for the first time in the phase, the middle grade novel was the first thing chronologically of all the wave of books. So like, and then on top of that, you have like, oh God, what was it? The Edge of Balance Volume 2, which they're like, hey, it's going to be digital only. And all the collectors like lost their minds, myself included, because we could never have a complete bookshelf. And then they're like, oh no, it'll come out digitally in March and physically in May. And I was like, what? You are not making it. Sometimes they make it a little hard on you. I will say that.
Yeah. To be clear though, this is not the writer's fault. Don't blame them. Don't tweet at them and yell at them for there being delays. Don't do that ever. Everyone is trying their best. It may not make sense to even the people involved, but just be kind, because the world, everything is chaos. And you know what? I guess like the one quote unquote good thing about this is like, I expect delays now. So when I hear about one, I'm like, okay, like I don't even get upset anymore, because a book is going to come out when it comes out and we just have to accept it, you know. For real though, this has been such a great discussion, and not just about Path of Deceit, but just about the High Republic in general. Like it started out as we didn't know what to expect when we first heard about it. We didn't even know what it was called. And now we're in the second phase and there's so many threads being tied together and things are unfolding, and it's just going to continue to get, I think, more and more interesting. And I will definitely have you back to talk about comics, but also just to talk more about the High Republic, because I really wanted someone on here when I did these High Republic discussions and reviews who really just loves it as much as I do. And you are definitely one of those people. And I'm so glad that I could finally have you on the show, because you've been a hard supporter since the beginning. And I just, you know how much I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And I'm so glad that we could sit down and do this, because I knew that we were going to have a great conversation, and I was correct. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find all of your things on the internet?
Well, yeah, you can find me on Twitter and TikTok at Jacob Bausch, Boushh, like the bounty hunter. And yeah, I just usually like post memes, and then like on TikTok, I've been going into insane. Like if you liked the crazy deep dive tangents I distracted the show with today, then you can find more of that there. So yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, your stuff is fantastic. And if you're not following Jacob already, please fix that. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. It has been so great.
Thanks so much.
And thank you all so much for listening. I love these discussions. I love being able to talk about Star Wars books in depth with people. You know, that's what the show is for. That's why I made the show, because what better way to spend time than to talk about the things about Star Wars that we love, right? That's why we're here. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation, and these book discussions will continue. I will continue giving you my spoiler-free reviews and the spoiler discussions and so much more in all the episodes to come. The show is going to be around for a while. I really enjoy making it, and I hope you really enjoy listening. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network and is produced, written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. Keep up with the show on Twitter at Star Wars Lit Pod, and find the show wherever you normally get your podcasts. to support the show, subscribe to our newsletter. It has all sorts of fun resources for you, and we'll hopefully have more in the months to come. As always, your support means so much to me, and it makes making the show even more fun. For more book reviews and Star Wars book celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.